Hello and welcome to the 13th episode of the PEM podcast, Psychic Eye Mystery Podcast. I'm your host, Victoria Laurie, with my fabulous sister, who's looking so gorgeous today. For those of you that are just tuning in, Sandy looks amazing today.
No, you know what?
She's wearing a beautiful color, complements her skin. We've had a couple compliments actually on our skin. Smoke and mirrors, people, smoke and mirrors. Do, do, do.
It's a good makeup.
Makeup. Do you remember that? Oh shit. I don't know if it was it in Boston? I can't remember if it was in Boston. It was like an ad for the Boston Zoo, and it had like all the animals kind of walking around, places, everyone places. And then I forget, I think it was like the flamingo was like, makeup, I need my makeup.
No, I don't remember that. And even if I did, I'm not going to admit that I remember that.
It was a really cute ad. It was really cute and very, very clever.
But 30 years ago, maybe, but
anytime I do like any kind of public experience, appearance, I always think, makeup, I need my makeup. The flamingo in me. Oh man, I am tired, girl. I am wiped out. It has been a week. So Sandy has this amazing eagle eye. She's really, really good with catching typos and inconsistencies and stuff. So I had the copy edits due on a manuscript that's coming out, I think next August, called Coached Red-Handed. So it's the fourth book in my Gilly Cat series. The Life Coach Mysteries. And I really loved the book. I loved how it came out. I'm very, very pleased with it. But I always send it to Sands, I think I've got everything. I'm like, she's not going to find everything. And it's like pages of, typo here, da, da, da. So
it's not pages.
It was pages. And I'm always like I love you, but I'm always like, cut me some slack.
Okay, let the then you'd yell at me if I didn't catch the typos. So.
No, I would never yell at you. I would never yell at you for helping me out, which you did beautifully. So anecdotes for the week. You guys, I like, oh God, it was an intense week this week. Lot of what I've noticed is the better I get at this, the more people kind of come into the room, dead people kind of come into the room, and it gets really confusing. So I know I'm getting better and better and better. I had one last night. It was really cool. I was reading for a woman and picked up her mother, and I asked her if she had a younger sister. She did. And then I heard in my mind, I heard Nightingale, with an emphasis on the Gale. So I said, who's Gail? And she said, that's my older sister. So I thought that was a really cool way to give it to me. Right. But anyway, so I've had, I don't know if there's a run on people who were adopted this week, but I've read a bunch of people, like truly like 5 in the past 10 days, who were adopted, and talk about confusing. It's like biological mom and dad come in and adoptive mom and dad, and then it goes up like into the grandparents. So it's like just a crowded room of people. And oh man.
Well, whenever you tell me that this is what you're experiencing, I always picture from the movie Ghost, where Whoopi Goldberg is sitting there trying to hold a session, and there's all these people around the table, and she just is like yelling at them to leave her alone.
Yeah. It just, and it's frustrating for me because, you want to knock it out of the park, right? You want to like be like, pew, 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 pew. And when it gets crowded like that, it is so confusing, and you're trying to parse out who's who. Last night too, they were all kind of switching sides. So like normally mom's stuff is on the right and dad's stuff is on the left. Dad's ancestors, mom's ancestors. And I don't know, they just decided to mix it up last night. So of my readings last night, I had 2 where grandparents came in and they switched sides. So, mom's side was on the left and dad's side was on the right. And I'm like, there are rules, people,
Well, at least a bad guy didn't show up and, Molly, you in danger, girl, didn't happen. So
holy shit, right? Yeah. Oh God, that'll be next week. That will be next week. The other cool one that I've been saving, I guess it was cool. I was reading for a woman and someone who felt like a grandfather stepped forward, and I knew it was on dad's side of the family. And so I was like, okay, so I think I have your grandfather here on your dad's side. And she's like, well, he's still alive. I'm like, really? Because like it just really felt like a grandfather. And so I saw in my mind's eye, I saw like this man's shoulder had sort of scar tissue on it. And I was like, what is that? And I said, do you know anybody who had like a real problem with their shoulder? And, it didn't make any sense at all. And then I literally saw flames all around me, like, like walking through flames. Didn't hurt, wasn't scary. It was just like flames all around me. And I asked her, I said, was someone a fireman or in a fire? She goes, oh my God, my grand uncle, who actually was like my grandfather, I was the closest to him. He was in a fire and he got burned over like 70% of his body. Yeah, poor, he's better. That's not how he died. He recovered. But I thought that was a really interesting way to show that to me. And I love that there's no fear when they're showing me, this is how I died, this is how I passed away. There's just no fear. It's like, yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, that's the way I left, exit stage left through, the house on fire door, and we think of it's, it's so traumatic and it's so horrible to even contemplate, not doing anything but dying in your sleep, right?
Yeah, true. I mean, nobody wants to imagine a death other than dying in your sleep.
Right. I wonder what the statistics are, like people who die in their sleep versus die in like other ways, like grocery store heart attack or I don't know.
Over the prices. The price of milk is what?
Inflation. Thank you, Biden.
Not Joe's fault.
Yeah, it isn't. None is not, man. This shit that's happening in
Ukraine.
Thank you. I'm so tired, Sandy. I'm so tired.
Well, let's focus on the mystery then, because that's where all your energy is going to need to go.
Yes, let's do that. All right, sister. The Bennington Triangle. This was really interesting. So these are 5 separate cases, and the way that we're going to run through these is Sandy will take it case by case. There's 5. Oh God, that's horrible. I was doing CrossFit this morning, guys. I'm not bleeding.
What, my glasses are horrible?
No. I'm holding up my palm. I was doing CrossFit this morning.
I was not.
Well, I'm finally back in the gym after like a long time away. And I'm like, my baby hands, they're just getting all roughed up. Anyway, so each disappearance is a mystery. And so Sandy's going to read off the disappearance in chronological order, and then I will give my 2 cents as to what I think happened. So take it away, my fabulous sister.
Okay, so by way of background, the greater area of Glastonbury, Vermont is now mostly untouched, pristine wilderness. But in the late 1800s, the town of Glastonbury had a small but thriving population of about 240 people. Most residents were scattered throughout the community, but came together to work and support the Glastonbury Railroad Mining and Manufacturing Company. The company employed about 50 people from the area, and it operated a 1,600 bushel charcoal kiln and ran 2 sawmills, which produced about 2 million feet of lumber on an annual basis. The product was then shipped out via steam engine trains to Bennington, Vermont, and larger cities in the New York State area. By 1888, most of the company's accessible timber had been cut, and a winter blizzard shut down production line for about 3 months. And in the end of 1889 in March, operations came to a complete halt. So the weather was very beastly in this area. In early 1890, the company's mortgage was foreclosed upon, and shortly thereafter, the town was abandoned. All that remains in this very remote area is a ghost town, and to this day has long been the setting for bizarre sightings and unexplained disappearances that started almost 80 years ago.
Dum, dum, dum.
So between 1945 and 1950, the area drew a lot of attention with the unexplained disappearance of Middie Rivers, age 74, Paula Jean Welden, age 18, James E. Tedford, age 68, Paul Jepson, age 8, and Frieda Langer, age 53. All these people vanished on or around Glastonbury Mountain. The other commonalities among the 5 cases are that the time of day, most people disappeared between 3 and 4 p.m. And in the months, October to December, which was when they were all last seen alive. So could these disappearances be mystical? Native Americans consider Glastonbury Mountain cursed and used it strictly for burying their dead because all 4 winds met in that spot. There's also a mention in Native American folklore of an enchanted stone, which is said to swallow anything that steps on it. Locals, believing their Native American forefathers, have avoided the area as well and are willing to accept to this day the fact surrounding these mystical tales. So today we're going to explore what became of these 5 missing people and discuss whether these cases are related, perhaps by something sinister or maybe something mystical, or if in fact they're not related at all. So the first case is Middie Rivers. Just get my paper adjusted here. In 1945, at the beginning of the weekend of November 9th, 74-year-old hunting guide and avid outdoorsman Middie Rivers led a party of 4 hunters around Hell Hollow, located in the southwest woods of Glastonbury. Accompanied by Middie's son-in-law, Joe Lazoon Jr., the party made Lazoon's camp above Hunter's Rest their base for the weekend hunt. At around 4 p.m. on Monday afternoon, the 12th, Hollis Armstrong reported that Middie was anxious to get back to camp and broke ahead of the group to head up the trail near a large swamp. By the time the hunters returned to camp, Middie was nowhere to be found. Middie was an experienced woodsman, so the group initially were unconcerned, but as the night wore on, the group agreed to look for Middie first thing in the morning if he failed to turn up overnight. After searching for most of Tuesday morning, 2 hunters then headed back into town to ask the Bennington fire chief for help. From 3 to 10 p.m., a group of members from the town joined the hunters in their search. And while the mild weather hampered the search because of the mud, it gave hope that Middie would survive the overnight temperatures. Over the course of 8 days, more than 300 concerned locals, including workers from his former employer, Vermont Papers, and a group of U.S. Army soldiers from the Massachusetts Fort Devens area, fanned out throughout the vast wilderness to locate Middie. The only thing found from the massive search was a rifle cartridge that was of the same type of casing that Middie used with his gun. Nothing else was found to indicate what had happened to Middie or where he was. After 8 fruitless and frustrating days, just shy of Middie's 75th birthday, the search was called off, and Middie Rivers has never been seen again. So what do we think happened to poor Middie?
You know, I absolutely love his name, right? Middie. Like, I don't know if that's a nickname or if that's, you know, a twist on like his given name, but my God, I can't wait to kind of name a character Middie. Like, it's so cool. That's a really cool name. I love it. Anyway, so my theory is that it's kind of, you know, indelicate, but I kind of feel like Middie was anxious to get back to camp because he had to take a large dump. And I don't think anything nefarious happened to him. I think that he had a heart attack while relieving himself. And that he probably, you know, was sitting on a log, right? And fell over, perhaps into the swamp. That's kind of my feeling. When I kind of really tried to tune in on him, it was interesting because I feel like he went a little bit north of where the camp was, and kind of into the woods sort of thing. Yeah, that's how I feel. Middie met his demise.
Well, it's, you know, given that there was a big swamp in the area, it's likely he did fall in, and it would explain why he wasn't found.
Exactly.
And if he knew the area as well as he did, he probably had picked a spot out in his mind where he wanted to go and, you know, do his business. And it likely was relatively remote.
Do his business.
Do his business.
He had some business with the flapjack breakfast he'd had and 4 cups of coffee. Oh, goodness. Yeah. And, you know, the other thing that I find is interesting is like, you know, all of these locals come and they're helping to search, but like, this is woodland that, you know, you can literally like just walk right past a body and not see it because of the foliage and everything else. And this took place in November, right?
Yes.
So leaves are on the ground. So it's not hard to lose someone amongst the debris, right?
Yeah.
That's on the ground right around November 9th. So
or try and pick up a trail of someone, if he's gone off trail into the woods, why would you think to look kind of in that area? Right? You're following the trail.
Exactly. So, yeah. And they probably thought, well, did he even make it to camp? So I'm sure they focused their concentration on the search south of the camp, so yeah, that's what I think happened to him. Poor guy. Okay.
Well, he met an untimely death in a timely way. So, all right.
So bad.
Our next case. Our next case is a woman named Paula Jean Welden. And a little over a year later, after Middie had disappeared, on Sunday, December 1st, 1946, 18-year-old Paula Jean Welden finished her job at the Bennington College Commons and went back to her dorm room in Dewey Hall to change her clothes. Paula told her roommate Elizabeth that she was feeling homesick after missing a Thanksgiving celebration with her parents and 4 sisters. No one knows on record why she didn't go home for Thanksgiving. Thinking a hike along the long trail near Glastonbury Mountain would do her good, Paula dressed in a red jacket with a fur-trimmed hood, blue jeans, and white sneakers. The 5'5" sophomore art major also wore a small gold wristwatch with a narrow black band and reportedly took very little money with her. When she left campus, the outdoor temperature was 50 degrees. At about 2:30 in the afternoon, Paula was seen walking down the road across from campus by a gas station attendant. Louis Knapp picked her up around 2:45 p.m. and drove her as far as his home on Route 9, which was about 3 miles from the hiking trail. Sometime around 4 p.m., Ernest Whitman and 3 of his friends came out of a camp in Bickford Hollow and saw Paula. She asked Ernie about a trail length before she headed towards a bridge that led to the trail that she'd inquired about. Other students claimed to have seen her near the Fay Fuller camp, which was further up the trail, but the reliability of those reports isn't clear. 3 residents of Woodford confirmed that they saw a girl walking towards the long trail near a camp called Hunter's Rest. However, it was unlikely that Paula could have reached Hunter's Rest because she would have had too much trouble crossing a stream only wearing sneakers. The camp owned by William Lazon reported that 3 servicemen, J.W. Carroll, William Watts, and M. Goldner, passed through earlier on Sunday and left a suitcase with Lazon, but they never retrieved it. Oddly, Hunter's Rest is the same camp from which Middie Rivers had disappeared from a year ago. As darkness fell, Paula was on the trail, inadequately dressed and without supplies to help her survive the wilderness. By Monday morning, December 2nd, the temperature in Bennington registered at 9 degrees. Alarmed that Paula hadn't shown up to her morning classes, authorities in New York and Massachusetts were alerted, and the news media circulated the story of the missing co-ed. On Tuesday, December 3rd, a massive search was carried out on the college campus and the section of Long Trail that led to the Glastonbury Fire Station, which crosses Route 9. A local taxi driver, Abe Ruskin, told authorities that he took a student to the bus station on Sunday afternoon, but he couldn't positively identify her as Paula. Clerks at the station didn't remember anyone of her description, as it was a busy post-holiday travel day. Ora Telletier, a diner waitress at the Modern Restaurant on Pleasant Street in Fall River, which was 150 miles from Bennington, reported that on Sunday night at about 9:30 in the evening, she had served a girl matching Paula's description. Ora noted that the girl was with a 25-year-old intoxicated man that had acted in a very abusive manner. And when the man approached the counter, the girl signaled Ora to come to her. She then asked Ora where she was and how far it was to Bennington because she had to get back to Bennington. Ora said the girl had not been drinking but seemed a bit dazed. Upon learning about the waitress account, Paula's father disappeared for 36 hours, supposedly in pursuit of that lead. Authorities found his absence strange, and suspicion grew as stories began to circulate that Paula's home life was not as nearly idyllic as her parents had led the police to believe. By Wednesday night, the college president issued a statement saying that the authorities suspected foul play. They believed that Paula's body had been hidden. Despite the extensive search, no substantial evidence turned up to indicate what had happened to Paula. The search for the college co-ed came to an end on December 15th. And the following May, after the snowmelt, Paula's father organized a final ground search of the area where Paula had last been seen, but searchers found no trace of his daughter. In the weeks and months following Paula's disappearance, her father would become vocal about his criticism of law enforcement and their lack of an effort to investigate his daughter's disappearance to their full capabilities. His criticism extended to the state house, as at the time, Vermont did not have a state police force. In 1955, which is 9 years after Paula disappeared, a man named Fred Gaudette, who worked as a lumberjack in the area and lived near the trail where Paula had vanished, made a voluntary statement to local authorities that he had information about Paula's disappearance and he knew where her remains were buried. However, before police could pursue his confession, Gaudette recanted, claiming he was simply seeking public attention. While it was discovered that Gaudette had also reportedly bragged to others about attacking and killing Paula, the information was hearsay and did not result in any credible leads about Paula's whereabouts. Paula's case ultimately went cold and she was eventually declared dead. To date, no trace of the missing co-ed has ever been uncovered.
Yeah, this one was a puzzler because so many people kind of reported seeing her. So I do think that she made it to the trail. It's interesting how many people she kind of passed and saw her and remembered that they had seen her. But then again, she's wearing the red jacket, so maybe that was sort of memorable, right?
Yes.
The one that the biggest puzzler is Ora Telletier, who said she saw a woman matching Paula's description. It's 150 miles away from Bennington. So when I tuned in
another state, by the way, it's
right,
travel from Vermont down to Fall River, Mass,
exactly.
Which is
I know,
an odd trail,
right? Mm-hmm. So I'm very suspect about Ora's encounter with Paula, that it was actually Paula. I kind of feel like it wasn't Paula. I immediately felt, this one stood out to me. I immediately felt that Paula had been attacked, that she'd been strangled. And the description that I got in my mind's eye was a light-eyed, so blue, green, hazel-eyed person with dark hair, black hair. And then when I went looking a little deeper and found Fred Gaudette, I'm like, boom, that's him. That's the guy. So yeah, I think that he came upon her and it was a crime of opportunity. Interestingly, I kept feeling like, he raped her and then he strangled her. And then I kept feeling like he threw in the town dump. And I'm like, does this place even have a town dump? Like, is it enough people to create a town dump? And then later in one of the other mysteries, boom, there it is, the town dump. So it's right there. So I feel like he buried her towards the back of the town dump under garbage, and she's never seen again, unfortunately. But I kind of feel like that's where she was.
Did you have a feeling that Fred had committed other crimes?
This was the only one that kind of stood out to me, but he probably did, because anybody that's going to go around boasting, probably has committed other nefarious acts. And this is again in the early 1950s, right?
1946.
Yeah. So, who's going to report? The state had no state police force. Who's going to report him, right? So basically, you could get away with whatever you wanted to get away with. Actually,
unfortunately.
Yeah. Especially if you were causing violence to a woman back then. Women were property, basically, back in those days. So yeah, I think he got away with it, unfortunately. The other puzzler was the three servicemen, right?
Yes.
Carroll, Watts, and Golder. Were they ever questioned? Was there anything? So it's just they name them, right?
They named them because of the group of people that were in the area. And these guys, I think, got named because they left that suitcase behind near the camp where Middie had disappeared. And it's likely that they just were tired and didn't feel like going back to get the suitcase. So, they're just part of whatever research I could pull together around the case.
Gotcha. Yeah, that was my feeling too, Sans, is if they're servicemen, they probably had to get, report back. And didn't have time to retrieve the suitcase, and driving to this location was a long drive, and it's like, screw it, it's just close, weekend close, whatever. So poor Paula, that's what I feel happened to her. I don't think that her father had anything to do with it, and I think that the rumors that her home life wasn't the idyllic thing that it should have been, or was presented to be. Whose home life is,
some people's.
Exactly, not ours. So maybe it was rough, but I don't see him committing her. Like, why? Why, right? There's no reason for him
I
to
think
do
he
it.
worked very hard to find his daughter.
I agree.
I have a feeling the reason that the negative light was painted on him was because he was so critical of the state.
Yeah.
And, a quick way to shut that criticism down is to point the finger back at him. So I think that's why that information kind of was prominent and promoted.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree. All right. The next one.
Okay, so
really a puzzler.
So fast forward 3 years in late November 1949, 68-year-old James E. Tedford boarded a bus in St. Albans, Vermont, where he had spent the holiday visiting with family, to travel back to Bennington, where the war veteran resided in a retirement home. The 150-mile bus trip should have taken the better part of 8 hours, with stops along the way and a pass through the Green Mountain National Forest. But a recent snowstorm had left heavy snowfall in the area, and that had resulted in a long delay. On December 1st, 1949, 3 years to the day that Paula Welden disappeared, James's family reported him missing after discovering that he had not returned to the Bennington retirement home. Investigators learned that the bus was traveling down Route 7 through the Bennington Triangle when James reportedly disappeared. Multiple eyewitnesses, including 14 passengers and the bus driver, confirmed that James was still in his seat, napping as late as the last stop before reaching Bennington. Yet when the bus pulled into Bennington, James was gone. And yet his luggage and an open bus timetable were still on his seat. None of his fellow passengers noticed the old man leaving the bus. No one knows what became of James Tedford after that fateful bus ride. That's all I got.
We know what happened to him. So, yeah, for me, again, no one disappears into thin air. Like, I love how it's like this sort of mystical, yes, the laws of physics will be suspended momentarily while we take this person out of this physical space. So for me, he got off the bus, probably to relieve himself. He was napping. He woke up. It was an 8-hour drive. And he's a 68-year-old, he's 68, right? 68,
Yes.
68-year-old guy. He's living in a retirement home, probably wasn't the speediest individual, right? Do you remember the people around you the last time you got on a bus or a plane?
Well, I haven't been on a bus and I can't even tell you. And no, on a plane.
Right. Plane, train, or automobile. Do you remember the people around? You don't, right? You're just like tunnel vision. These people had been on this bus for 8 hours. Heads are down. If they were speaking to anybody, it was someone probably sitting next to them.
Yeah.
And probably walked right by him. He had been sleeping. They probably, one or two people took note of that. And then when they get off, I think that he, while the bus driver's attention was diverted, probably taking out the luggage, right? For the passengers who were getting off, he probably got off to relieve himself. And the bus took off. And then he probably thought, well, I'll hitchhike, so he doesn't have his coat, doesn't have any money. All of his belongings are still on the bus. He's 68 years old, not dressed for the weather. It's December, right? December 1st, right?
Yeah. Well, I think he just disappeared at the end of November, but he wasn't reported missing until December 1st. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's wicked cold, as they say in that neck of the woods.
Yeah, it would have been late in the day by the time that bus had stopped at the where by its destination, because it was delayed due to the snowfall. So
yeah. Oh, so there's snow on the ground too.
Yeah.
So this guy stood no chance. He stood no chance. So I'm pretty convinced that he got off the bus to relieve himself, came back, saw the bus had gone, probably started walking in the direction of where the bus went, thinking maybe a car will come along and pick me up, and probably quickly developed hyperthermia, probably stumbled off the road, and that's it. That was it for him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a tough way to go too for an old man. So freezing to death that's a tough way to go. Poor guy.
I would agree. Okay. So number 4 is about a year later, on October 12, 1950, 8-year-old Paul Jepson of Shasberry, Vermont, went missing. With his mom nearby, Paul, wearing a bright red jacket, was happily playing in the family pickup truck parked near the Bennington town dump, where his parents worked as caretakers. Paul's mother left to feed the family pigs and returned to the truck about an hour later, but her son was nowhere to be found. In addition to the hundreds assembled for a search party, a New Hampshire sheriff brought a bloodhound to sniff out the missing boy. The dog was able to pick up a scent, but abruptly lost the trail at a nearby crossroads, suggesting a possible abduction by a motorist. As the case dragged on without resolution, some suggested that Paul met an early demise at the hands of his parents. But in keeping with the lore of the Bennington Triangle, Paul's father told the Albany Times Union that perhaps it was the lure of the mountains that pulled his missing son, as the boy had talked of nothing else for days prior to his disappearance. That's all we got.
Okay, so Paul Jepson's case is really interesting to me because Sands and I used to live eons ago. We used to live in Connecticut, New Canaan, Connecticut, and we lived in a house that buttressed up against some pretty dense woods. And I was maybe 6 at the time. You were 9, I think, right? Like right around in there, yeah. And I used to go exploring those woods by myself all the time, you know. And that was in the 70s. So in the 50s, right, it was just like, let your kid wander. And
let me leave him in the truck and I'm going to go
exactly, right? We don't have the same, we didn't have the same worry or fear. It was basically, you know, the wolves will raise him kind of thing, probably. Yes. And you're living in Vermont, so there's a fair amount, I think, of survivalist kind of thing going on, right? Like his parents probably thought he was mature enough to be able to handle himself out in the elements, and she just went home to feed the pigs and was going to be right back. So I 100% agree with the father that he wandered off to probably go exploring and got lost, and again hypothermia set in, and he perished. The bloodhound at the crossroads thing, that's interesting, but it doesn't really ring any alarm bells to me. First of all, who's coming through this town and abducting a child, right? Like who's even there, right, to do that? What, there's 200 people there? Like there's nobody there. So I'm not buying that. I kind of have a feeling that maybe Paul's scent got mixed up with, you know, could have been car exhaust. This is, again, the 1950s, you know, it's not like they're burning clean fuel. And the other scent's probably in the road, and the bloodhound lost the trail. So that could have been Paul's following the road, and he exits off the road at some point down, and the bloodhound just missed it, and so did everybody else. So yeah, I think he probably would have succumbed fairly quickly to exposure and hypothermia, is sort of my feeling. So that's my feeling about Paul. I don't feel he was abducted. I don't feel his parents murdered him. Really don't feel his parents murdered him. I just feel that it was a very unfortunate circumstance where he wandered off, got lost, and, you know, again, this is thick woods. You know, I wouldn't feel safe exploring them, you know. So anyway, that's what I feel like that happened to poor Paul.
Okay, just a note of clarification in terms of the pigs. They would bring the pigs to the dump area to feed, and so she went down towards the dump. I know, but that was kind of like she didn't leave him in the truck and went home. She was in the general area of the truck.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. But just, you know, likely had her back to the truck, and he probably got out and started wandering. So.
Which is, you know, again, it's so easy to blame parents, right? When bad things happen to children, it's like, you should have been watching him. You should have been looking out, and maybe you had something to do with it. And I think it's a long shadow that we cast on parents who already feel terrible, right? You know, who hasn't had a child that's like slipped from their view? We used to slip from our parents' view all the time.
On purpose.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, not unusual at all. Poor little guy. So yeah, that's what I think happened.
So our final victim, a short 2 weeks later, on October 28th, 1950, 53-year-old Frieda Langer of North Adams, Massachusetts, went missing in the Somerset area of the Long Trail bordering East Glastonbury. After hiking a half mile with her cousin Herbert Eisner, Frieda lost her footing and fell into a stream. Soaking wet, she set back to camp to change her clothes and meet up with her husband, Max, who was resting a sore knee. But the experienced hiker and survivalist, who was familiar with the area, never returned to camp. As many as 400 people, as well as Connecticut Coast Guard manned helicopters, soldiers from a U.S. Army Massachusetts base, and the Vermont Aeronautics Commission all searched for Frieda, but the meticulous search turned up nothing. 6 months later, after she disappeared on May 12, 1951, Frieda's body was discovered near the Somerset Reservoir, an open area that had been extensively searched numerous times. Unfortunately, her corpse had decayed to the point where a cause of death could not be determined, and no one knows how it is that she disappeared for 6 months and then turned up.
Yeah, I love that these are kind of like, they're really all individual little puzzlers. I think Frieda got hypothermia. She's soaking wet. She's trying to make her way back to camp. When you get hypothermic, and I have been hypothermic, your brain just doesn't work. It just doesn't want to work. And all you want to do is get warm. So I have a feeling she ended up near the reservoir, was thinking, I'll wrap myself in some leaves, try and get warm, and then I'll carry on. And I think she froze to death. I think she died of hypothermia. As for why she ended up in the reservoir 6 months later after it had been extensively searched, okay, well, first of all, who's searching, right? Like if you're out for a long 6-hour search, right, of an area, you can, it's autumn. If she's covered in leaves, you can step right over the body or pass it right by without even seeing it, you know? So it's not suspicious to me at all that they didn't see her in the reservoir. But then when
near
the
melts, reservoir, not in it, near
it. Sorry, near the reservoir, right?
Yeah.
So then when the snow melts and rains come and, you know, sweep a lot of that debris aside and probably float her body some distance, and she's exposed and someone stumbles upon her, I don't get that she was murdered. I just don't. I don't get that there was like some serial killer abducting children and killing, you know, women who'd fallen into the streams. Just doesn't fit. Just doesn't fit for me. But it is odd. It's so odd that these people went missing like within such close proximity to each other.
5 years, same area. You know, the lore of it, they can't solve it, so it all becomes this big conspiracy. It's like the Bermuda Triangle, right?
Right. Yeah. So it is a little freaky. Like, I don't want to go there. No, thank you. I will pass. Please and thank you. Thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, that's not going to be a place where I go visit the Bennington Triangle. Again, I don't think there's any kind of weird, you know, vortexy kind of energy there. But
I think if you go, just stick with the path. Yeah, there are tons of hiking trails.
The trail. Just stick with
the trail. Don't go off trail. I had a lot of sources for these 5 mysteries. I just want to quickly list them. There's Accessible Archives, The History of the Town of Glastonbury, Vermont by J.D. Thomas, 9-11, freepages.rootweb.com, Glastonbury, Vermont. All that's interesting.com, Inside the Unsolved Disappearance of the Bennington Triangle by John Kruszewski, 5/2018. Grunge.com, The Biggest Bennington Triangle Disappearance Theories, What Really Happened. History Day by Day, Unraveling the Unsolved Disappearances of the Bennington Triangle by Gur Thoros. Avianmedium.com, The Unexplained Bennington Triangle Disappearance, 6/27/21. Rexhurst.com, Unsolved Mysteries, The Vermont Long Trail Disappearances, 5/15/18. The Bennington Evening Banner, November 14th, 1945 and October 13th, 1950. Vermonter.com, The Bennington Triangle. BasicTrendy.com, James E. Tedford, Vanished into Thin Air, 7/20/21. And finally, Grunge.com, The Biggest Theories about Paula Jean Welden's Disappearance, What Really Happened by Jennifer Duchman, 12/20/22/21.
A lot of people have written about these.
Yes.
You know, trying to figure them out. And, you know, I always come back to what's the simplest answer? What's the most logical answer?
Everybody died of exposure except
Paula
Jean Welden.
Yeah, she was the one that I really felt. Middie died of a heart attack. I really feel Middie had a heart attack.
Yeah, sorry, and fell in a swamp.
And fell in a swamp.
Just to seal the deal.
Yeah. You thought you were having a bad day.
Have a heart attack in a swamp.
In a swamp.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, it was his time to go. Definitely.
Apparently, yeah. There was no getting around his time to go.
Yeah, none. Oh, just in case you survived the heart attack. I got to deal with being in a swamp now. So yeah, I think it's the most logical conclusions for what happened to all 5 of these, except for Paula. Paula's case just jumped out at me that there was something other than just getting lost and dying of hypothermia with her.
Yeah.
So really quickly, before we go, let's promote another Victoria Laurie book, because I have actually a fun anecdote about this. So
if it's about me, I'm hanging up. I'm serious.
I'm not saying anything, Sandy. I'm not saying it's not about you. Actually, it's not about you. It's about Jim. I'm laughing because there was a scene in one book that Sandy very, very loosely inspired, and I took it to the extreme. And I don't know that she's ever forgiven me for it. But anyway, she hasn't. Anyway, so Vision of Murder. Abby has gone into a partnership with her handyman. They buy a property that needs to be fixed up, and they're going to turn it into a rental. And it turns out the house is haunted and has a very nefarious kind of past. So a woman was murdered and is discovered at the bottom of the stairs. There's a whole World War II kind of influx here. So it's timely with the Bennington Triangle time period. And the woman actually ended up disappearing, and so do some very valuable jewels. Anyway, there is a scene where I told my agent, you inspired this character. And, this is before Gilly. This is a little bit before Gilly. Yeah, this is before Gilly. So he'd inspired a character named James in the book. So I write out the rough draft and I sent it to Jim to read. And like a day later, I get a phone call. You murdered me? You killed me? Oh, he was so mad. He was so mad.
Well, it's the way you set it up. Oh, you've inspired me with this character. And then you're like excited to read about, your version of who I might be in a book. Oh, and by the way, I killed you.
Dead.
You're dead.
You're dead.
So you're dead to me.
You died.
Just saying.
It had to be someone. So so he was so offended. He was so upset that I had to rewrite the ending where he lives, but I killed my accountant. So I just hope I don't get audited, please.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Vision of Murder. Sold everywhere books are sold. The Abby Cooper Psychic Eye Mysteries. Book number 3 out of that one. All right, Sands, what's coming up for next week? We've got a good one next week.
So next week, we're going to visit the case surrounding Betsy Aardsma. She was a Penn State student, and in 1969, the day after Thanksgiving, she was stabbed to death in the school library. And nobody understood at the time that she had actually been stabbed. They thought she had fainted, and it was actually a very precise stabbing to ensure that she died.
I kind of can't wait to dive into that intuitively, see what I see. It'll be really interesting. In a library, murdered in a library in the bright light of day with people around.
Yeah.
So insane. People are bold. All right. Well, thank you again, my sister. You did such a great job. Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm going to go take a nap.
Okay. I am not.
All right. I love you so much. And we'll talk. Yeah, we'll talk soon. Tune in next week, guys, for another edition of the PEM podcast.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.